Fuel additives. Okay. So another one is engine performance for diesel and biodiesel. So biodiesel has relatively higher cetane number. I think it goes for diesel is around 55 to 57. I think that's what we're measuring in our IRX. 45. Yeah, 45. Yeah. 55 is the biofuel. Yeah. And so it's actually the measurement of ignition quality of your diesel. You're actually how it combusts in a engine chamber, and with fuel higher with a higher CN cetane number, it actually burns evenly. But this, I'm kind of careful on this one, gives more power. It's actually not always true. So most diesel, if it has a slightly higher cetane number, it has more power. But in biodiesel, it actually has higher cetane number, but it doesn't have more power. So because of that oxygen. So it doesn't really pertain to, it's not always true that it will give more power if you have really high cetane number. And usually the decrease in power is your dirty injectors. So for additives, this is an example. So you have accumulation of carbon residue, carbon deposits over here. You can have cetane improvers, detergents just to clean this, or dispersants just to clean your injectors. So for diesel, it actually has some ppms of cetane improvers, usually when you buy it from your from stations, gas stations, fuel stations. So, but you can still also add some fuel additives that are available in the market, so to improve your cetane number. But be careful. Some of what we tested back 2 years ago, some of the companies will claim that it will increase the cetane number up to 4% or up to 20%. But that word "up to" is actually the most optimal condition. So in our testing, sometimes it doesn't really improve your power or your cetane number. So that "up to" is really marketing scheme. So just be careful. It's typical to have somebody who already used the fuel additives and ask if there's an improvement in cetane number or in the fuel efficiency, engine performance. For biodiesel, it's actually the same as diesel. It has, because this residues, we have a test of carbon residue deposits. This one we have a test to test that, and we found that if you have a good biodiesel and compared to diesel, it's the same. I mean, it will not have, it will prevent your fuel injectors. But if you have a bad biodiesel, for example, it has a mixture of oil in it. Let's say 10% of oil is still in your biodiesel. Your carbon deposit will actually be higher in the point that it will not pass the ASTM standard, and eventually it will clog or make your fuel injectors like this. We tested SVO as well, straight vegetable oil, and waste vegetable oil in our engines, and we found that old engines will run your waste vegetable oil and straight vegetable oil. When I say straight vegetable oil, it's just a natural oil. You don't convert it to biodiesel. You just heat it up and then use it as your fuel directly. Waste vegetable oil are frying oils. So we did that test as well. I mean, in carbon deposits, it's very, very high. It will eventually, not eventually, I mean, we don't know, but that test shows that it will eventually clog your fuel injectors because of those carbon deposits. But in our experience, SVO gives more power and it runs smoother. It's not less noise when running straight vegetable oil because it's a lubricant. It's actually a good lubricant, just like biodiesel. The only problem is when you're using new engines like a 2007 Cummins engine, we found that when we use waste vegetable oil, the ECU will actually knows that you're using a different fuel, not a standard fuel, not diesel or biodiesel, it will shut it down. So that's usual. That's our experience on using waste vegetable oil and straight vegetable oil. So, but for biodiesel and other, for biodiesel, there's no problem with this one, engine performance. But for biodiesel, it has less energy content compared to diesel, so you'll experience less power in your, or less power in when you're using biodiesel. I think it's 0.1% less based on our experience. That's B100 and diesel, but when you're using B20, 20%, it doesn't have any difference. So it's the same power as your diesel. So this is the usual. So aside from oxidative stability in biodiesel, this is one of the deficiencies that we're working on, which is cold performance of biodiesel. Diesel doesn't have this problem because it's a hydrocarbon, and usually it stays liquid even below us negative 18 degrees Celsius. You don't see any small crystals like a cloudy one. Diesel number 2, we tested that. For plugging point, cold plugging point, wherein it plugs your fuel filters, we tested it will plug around negative 20 to negative 24 degrees Celsius. So I don't know what that's in Fahrenheit, but that's really, really low. So for biodiesel, we tested this. For palm oil biodiesel, it has a lot of saturated compounds. So actually it will form crystals like this, and this will clog your filters and will stall the engine. Now for palm diesel, we experienced that even though with an additive, this is a petroleum-based additive, it doesn't change. It still has some crystals. But for sunflower biodiesel, as you can see, this is at negative 20 degrees Celsius. Without the fuel additive, so it's crystal, really, really big crystals. But this one, even though it's small, I mean, even though this is crystals, it's small enough that it will pass through the filters. So it will still work at negative 20 degrees Celsius. So with additives in biodiesel, it depends on the feedstock that you're using actually. And sometimes some companies will claim that it will work with biodiesel as well. But be careful what type of biodiesel is that. So if you're using coconut or palm oil, sometimes it's not going to work. But I know that there's nobody using palm oil here, so or palm biodiesel. So usually it's sunflower. We have canola. Canola is so far is probably the best biodiesel in this climate. So what we discovered, camelina has a good cold performance, but the problem is storage, because it's storage issues because of the oxidative stability of camelina. It's not really good. So we're still researching on what additives to add to camelina so that you can store it much longer than 6 months. So, what does cold weather performance additives do? So it's actually just a big compound. So you cannot prevent the cloudiness or the small crystals to form, but you can prevent it to become bigger. So that's usually what additives do, is to prevent those small crystals to get bigger, and it will clog your engine. So you have filter clogging at 2 to 4 microns. So you don't want crystals having larger than 2 microns. So that's what fuel additives do. But it will not prevent the cloud point, because cloud point is the point wherein you see small crystals forming, it becomes cloudy. So even diesel, when I tested it yesterday, I mean, you can see at CFPP of negative 18, you can negative 20, you can see it's really cloudy, but it still passes through to the filter, to the screen, which has 2 microns. But after 4 degrees lower, it will clog the filter. So because the crystals becomes bigger and it clogs the filter. So it will cause pump failure. And if you have water in your system, so it will form ice. So that's why sometimes adding alcohol, because alcohol is really like a hygroscopic to water, it will I mean, if you have water, a little bit of water sediment, and you add alcohol, sometimes it will just disappear. So it's actually some companies before, that's, I think 5 years ago, they will claim, yeah, it removes water, but actually it doesn't remove water, it actually just dissolves it to the diesel fuel. So you don't see the water, but it will have a problem when you're operating cold, because those water will, because it's, I mean, it has properties, it will crystallize at 0 degrees Celsius, so it will be a problem. And those crystals will be a seed on making bigger crystals as well. So this deicer, sometimes they see, you will see alcohol in it as a deicer, but right now I think today's fuel additives, they will say alcohol free. So because they know that it's not really a deicer, it's just, it's not really a, what you call this, prevents water, it removes water, and also in your fuel, fuel wiper fluids, it has methanol because it really has a low, it actually makes the water and methanol have a lower freezing point as well. So but it's bad when you're mixing in the fuel. So these are samples. So as you can see, alcohol free, because water will make corrosion. So you'll see improved horsepower. This is the term, with up to 5-point cetane rating gain. So this up to is the most desired, the optimum conditions that they tested it. Increases fuel economy, can result up to 8% improvement in miles per gallon. So this word can result. So there's a lot easier and faster startup. So this is a cold performance as well. This one, it's a cold performance additive and engine performance additive. So these are the labels that you need to be aware of. But it's best to have an actual experience on using the fuel additives, or somebody knows that whether it works or not. Power service, so you have prevents fuel from gelling, so as low as -40 degrees Fahrenheit. This is really low because -40 degrees Fahrenheit is also -40 degrees Celsius, so it's really low. Fuel performance of 50-50 blend of number 2 and number 1 diesel fuels. CFPP as much as 36 degrees Fahrenheit. So it keeps fuel filters from plugging with wax. I think this should be -36. Because 36 degrees Fahrenheit is really high. Freezing is 32. So this is usually the cold performance. What else? Boost cetane up to 4 numbers. So it could be classified as an engine performance additive, so boost power. It's just performance as well. Let's see. Seafoam cleans injector. So usually this is a contaminant control. Removes moisture. This is what usually not a good term because it doesn't have alcohol. If you know the ingredient, this possibly contain alcohol, so removes moisture means you don't see moisture in your fuel. So actually it's just alcohol dissolving making the water dissolve in the diesel fuel. So I guess that's it. So I hope you enjoyed and learned something on fuel additives.
See, pretty much all your additives don't just, like we had those 4 classifications, but
Yep.
I don't see one additive is doing one, they're kind of doing multiple classifications.
Usually, yeah. Because most of the time the fuel additives is a mixture of compounds as well. So like the antioxidants or for fuel stability, they will have aromatic type of compounds, and then metal deactivators will have the same. compound as well, so, and then they mix it with other stuff so that consumers will buy their product instead of buying multiple products as well.
Now,
So,
what additive do you personally buy? If you go buy an additive, what are you gonna pick based on your research?
based on, we did the research back in 2008, so I'm not really updated on what companies have been doing based on R&D, but based on that research, we have power service that's really good, in-call performance for biodiesel and also diesel, and that's on that study that's the best what we found out power service. But I don't quote me in this one because companies continuously develop our R&D research on developing their fuel additives. So we haven't tried, we haven't, have some funding on doing some more research on fuel additives. We're research more on our side, our research is on developing advanced fuels, advanced biofuels right now. So that's our focus. Because we discovered, I mean, we tried camelina biodiesel. I mean, you can make camelina biodiesel, but it still has some deficiencies in it. I mean, it can be solved by fuel additives, but for oxidative stability, it's still hard to find a perfect fuel additive for stabilizing or making camelina biodiesel stable so that you can use it even beyond 6 months of operation. So that's why we shifted to making camelina to a drop-in fuel, because with that we don't need to deal with the fact that the chemistry of camelina has the omega-3 fatty acids. We always say that the omega-3 fatty acids of those camelina biodiesel is good for your heart, but not good for your engine. So that's why we're shifting to making drop-in fuels. And camelina is the best, I mean, so far, based on what UOP, Honeywell, and other big companies and research universities are researching, and even us, we found that omega-3 fatty acids is a good way to cut the oil to make drop-in fuel, especially jet fuel. So, and even renewable diesel. So that's our research right now. But we haven't done any updated research on what fuel additives for the biodiesel. What I would recommend is just to blend the biodiesel with diesel. Up to B20, it's okay. I mean, you will not have any problems as long as your biodiesel meets ASTM D6751. Once you mix it and blend it with 20%, it's fine. I mean, it will work well. So, but if you're going to use B100, that's where your problems comes out. So, and if you're going to store B100 as well, that's where your problems comes out as well. So, but if you're blending it once you produce it, bought it, blend it your diesel. If you blend it B5, you don't have any problem at all. I mean, it's the same. B20, you might see some changes. You will see benefits in the emissions. You will see some increase in NOx as well. So it's bad, but I mean, I don't know if with today's engines, the DPF, the urea, I don't know whether having a higher NOx will eat up your urea faster. We still haven't tested that or researched on that. But fuel stability-wise, storage-wise, blending it will have the same as storing a diesel fuel. So,
are there any specific additives that actually have been proven to, aside from the biodiesel going to B20, that actually decrease your PM or your NOx and SOx?
No.
No.
The PM is actually caused by having the fuel itself. If it has some unsaturated and especially aromatics, and petroleum diesel always have that, the aromatics. That's why in ASTM they control the polyaromatics. They want it below as much as 0.1, I think 0.5%. to zero. You don't want polyaromatics because that's actually the precursor for particulate matter. But you still have some aromatics in there, which could present. It's like a starting material for forming particulate matter. So the only way to reduce that is to get rid of the aromatics in the fuel, and there's no additive on that I have known that reduces PM matter. So the only way to reduce that is to mix it with biodiesel. So you're actually decreasing the content of aromatics. That's why you have real less emissions, PM emissions. So which actually helps DPF as well, your DPF. Yeah.
To my knowledge, Randy, all those labels on those additive packages, there's no legal requirement to justify what's on those labels.
Yeah, I think there's. I don't know the. Yeah,
If
probably
I
not.
pour some of this coffee in a pop can, put some fancy ass label on it, so if you wanted to buy it, I'd sure say sell it to you. But I'm not legally bound, and I put on there it's going to improve my cetane by a zillion numbers, and it's going to decrease my emissions by a zillion percent.
Yeah, I think there's no legal.
Because a lot of it is just kind of buyer beware.
Yeah, I think there's. I just heard that from a discussion before that. Yeah, there's no legal. You can put anything in a label. So there's no.
Is there anything we should look for then? Are seeing numbers better if it guarantees?
Usually it's much better. Sometimes because people that make those labels are not really scientists. I mean, I'm not a what you call it, not really a hardcore scientist. That's hardcore because they're marketing and their target is to convince people. So sometimes you can see some mistakes on their labeling as well. But it's hard to. I'm not really a marketing person, so but you can spot some difference there, some mistakes. Yeah, it's really hard to test to really guarantee what the label is. What you can ask if it's a new product, you can ask for a sample, and then you can just test it, and then based on experience, that's what you can do.
So this one says it significantly reduces emissions.
Yeah.
And this one says, you had on here, it's smoke suppressant, so it minimizes exhaust smoke. And I can see how somebody could take that and then confuse that with emissions.
Yeah. The smoke is actually how it burns.
Black smoke,
So,
particulars.
Is there any movement to regulate additives?
I don't know. Probably. Yeah.
So obviously in winter, you want, the cold weather added probably about every time you fill up.
Yep.
Yeah.
What about these others? How often should you?
It depends. For example, biocides. If you're going to store your fuel in months, you want to add that, and you don't have a really good fuel tank system, so you want to add that biocides and fuel stability as well. I mean, because if you have steel containers, that's usually what you want, because you can't really prevent forming the radicals, but you can stop it from propagating, and that will help make your fuel bad after 6 months. So
if farmers are getting bulk fuel, and when they get that delivered, they just dump all these additives in. Say they get one that's got a little bit of everything. Will that stay active until that actually makes it into the...
into the farm.
You can put a biocide in before you get biological growth.
You can add biocide. It would be still
6 months in terms of a biocide.
Because usually the fuel additives is a chemical base, and they actually like for biocide it just kills the microbes because of it contains boron, those kind of stuff, which actually prevents growth. For stability, actually it will stay active unless there's a radical or a fuel becomes starts degrading a molecule, and then it will actually quench it or sacrifice itself.
Okay.
So that's, but it will stay active. So yeah. For biodiesel production, we actually want right after the production we add the antioxidant.
Oh, yeah,
So
right.
yeah.
So it- yeah.
Yeah, so because it doesn't really, what you call it, if it's already oxidized, it's already a bad fuel. So, yeah, so.
What's different about biodiesel that makes it such a good detergent? I know I heard people used to work in Ohio,
yeah.
there were farmers that would
Yeah,
soy diesel in, and they just plug the filters like that.
yeah, it's a good solvent. Yeah, it will dissolve those, because usual diesel will have some, it will create some, what you call that, residue at the tank. And then when you add biodiesel, in its structure you have hydrocarbons in one side, other side is a metal ester, which is oxygen. That oxygen becomes a polar somehow. So you have a non-polar, just like soap, non-polar and a little bit of polar, and then actually dissolves that, what you call that, those dirt, those kind of stuff, yeah. So actually cleans your fuel engine. So, and it's also a good lubricant, biodiesel. I don't know if that company is still in operation, but one company in California, we found out that they're selling biodiesel as a lubricant additive. And having a ULSD standard, I mean, ultra low sulfur diesel has a really, really low lubrication value. So if you add biodiesel, B5 at most, at least B5, you'll have a good, yeah. So.
Andy was telling us about the additives. The one big problem that I have at additives is I kind of questioned them was, from my research, there is no legal obligation on anyone on any of these labels. They can put on there whatever they want. Now, if I buy an additive and it says it does X for my engine and it didn't do X for my engine, then I go back to that person who sold it to me, and all they have to do, and actually I had a lawyer tell me this, all that person has to do was say, well, you know what, it worked in my pickup, it worked in my buddy's pickup. End of conversation. They just justified what they had in that label. So this is buyer beware. All right, just be very, very careful when you guys are buying the additives, or when you're talking to your producers about it. What I tell my customers and what I tell my students is get on the internet and do the research. If this is I'm going to just pick on a couple here. Power Surface is a very, very reputable company. I can guarantee you that we could go to the internet and we would find independent data, research data, that would support every claim that's on that label. I wouldn't have a problem with that whatsoever. You've heard of the 5-hour energy blast, right? So this is what we have for diesel engines, all right? RXP, it's a gas kicker, it's a decarbonizer, add to the gasoline or diesel, I mean, it'll damn near toast your bread for you. All right, I probably wouldn't buy that one because I've actually been on the web and looked at that one, and I'm not going to buy that one. Okay.
So this comment about these people that make these labels are not scientists, if you read what it does, it says it reduces particulars.
Yeah, particulars, yeah.
Significantly.
Significantly, key word.
Not particulates.
Exactly. And then he made a very good point that, they're marketing. They have no idea what the hell they're writing, So just be, buyer beware. If your producers are asking you questions, which they probably will be, especially the biggest one they're looking for around here, or actually anywhere in Montana, is the anti-gel. All right, to lower that the temperature, to bring down your cloud point, to bring down your pour point, then ultimately bring down your gel point. All right, and a lot of that's back on their management too. Blending their fuels using straight number 1 or using an additive, but make sure they do their homework on their additive, because it's not all what's on the label. All right, and
Expensive?
some of them are very expensive. Yeah, some are very expensive. This one here, in fact, I got this actually at Flying J, but I know Big Iron Haver sells this, was I believe about $10 for that bottle. All right.
How much will that treat?
This one does
100 gallons. maybe.
I think it says 2,000 on the front, doesn't it?
Doesn't
It says
actually.
a third bottle treats
Oh, there you go.
approximately 50 gallons of fuel. So
Okay.
150.
150 gallon, yeah. 150 gallons. Thank you. Okay, so, but I know, and I think I know where I have the document, but I do have a document of when they tested this with biofuel. This was actually the best one for biodiesel, which leads me to believe it'll be pretty gosh darn good for straight diesel too. I actually sold this when I was in business, and none of my customers ever had a problem with it, ever. So this is a very reputable one right here. Okay. This one here, I was ecstatically excited to see. This was made in Bozeman, Montana. Well, it used to be made in Bozeman, Montana. Then I looked at it. You know what? We should break out the ice cream because that looks like a big topping, good topping for ice cream. You know?
I was looking at that. It
Yeah.
looks like it's all separated.
Exactly. So if this is sitting in my fuel tank, yeah, maybe it doesn't separate when it's mixed with diesel fuel. I don't know. I'm not going to find out. All right. This is, you know, and I don't want to Camelina increases fuel economy for gasoline or diesel, reduces emissions, and it saves you money. Montana Fuel Technologies, Bozeman, Montana.
And now they're not in
I don't think they are. No. Weren't you telling me, Joel, that they could do just about anything you ever wanted to do?
Yeah, I remember when they talked about that coming to, Dave Sands and Alice Pilgrim did some toying around with that. And, snake oil.
Snake oil, exactly. Yeah, and that's a very good term. I use that term a lot. That's a lot of what this stuff is. It's just snake oil. And all these samples here, I actually have about 22 samples. They're all available in Havre, Montana. And I'm sure if you go to Bozeman or Sydney or wherever, you're going to have others out there that we don't have here. So just, you know, buyer beware, okay?